Robbie Dorman believes in horror. He's published 16 novels and co hosts 2 podcasts, The Simpsons Show and The Cult Video Vault. When he's not writing, he's playing video games, watching pro wrestling, or walking his dog. He lives in Florida with his wife, Kim, and he thinks all narrative art should be anti-authoritarian. So, Robbie, I am going to kick myself out and let you take over.
Okay, thank you. This is a reading from my newest. It's called Yours Forever. It's an epistolary novel told in letters and follows the protagonist, Henry, as he delves deep below a Gothic mansion into a non-Euclidean maze in search of the stolen heart of his lost love. He writes to her throughout the novel. This chapter takes place shortly after Henry has descended into that maze of infinite doors and has just pushed through a new one. Death. There was only death behind the door. The yellow city, for its decay and rot, was clean and glowed golden, the scent of burnt sugar clinging to my nostrils as it lured me into its infinite, unspooling wiles. When I opened this door, I found myself in a world of flesh. The door fell out of my grasp, gone, vanished. But that is incorrect. It had not vanished. It had transformed. It took me a moment to understand, my eyes still adjusting to the red. Because the space glowed with an unearthly red, no lights visible, no lantern, no electric light, but everything a crimson that filled my vision. But then I realized the membranous, pulsating sphincter was the door I had entered. It glistened in the crimson light, covered in some sort of thick liquid, and I hesitated to touch it, not even sure how to open it. I turned to survey my surroundings. I saw I was inside of some sort of tremendous organ. The walls were flesh, various shades of pink and red, fibrous and muscled, with thick, wide, overarching beams of bone or cartilage. The floor itself was a springy, tongue-like material that moved as I stepped on it, my weight impacting it like a mattress. The space was enormous, a massive cavern, a cave of flesh I couldn't see the end of. Staring out into the red glow of the cave, I realized further ahead of me lay something different, not a piece of the flesh I stood on, but a darker substance, a deep red. The smell was not one of blood, not of copper and metal, but of putrid rot, of the deathly stink of gangrene, of flesh sloughing off the bone of the nearly dead. Then I saw I was not alone in this cavern of flesh. Bodies stacked and piled above my height, moldering, rotting, decaying corpses piled on top of each other, some nearly skeletons, others freshly dead, but all corpses, all dead. Everywhere I looked, I saw them now. The red glow of this organ I found myself in showing me them. They were not human corpses. They are humanoid of a sort, but their bones were thicker, larger, their bodies stooped, their faces craven like a rat. My curiosity picked at me to get closer to one, to examine it, to see the difference, for the study, for the science, but my stomach pulled me back, kept me from them. I should not touch them, could not touch them. I needed to find my way out, needed to be clear of this place. This was a place meant not for me, and my existence screamed in revulsion. Move forward, my mind shouted, and so I forced my feet onward. I wanted to retreat, to push through this fleshy passage behind me, but I needed to move if I was to ever find you. You might be on the other side of this. I had engaged on a journey of a straight line, and so on a straight line I would continue. I moved, the flesh pulsating under my feet, and I walked across this landscape of meat. The cavern was enormous, but I saw it was not infinite, the bounds of the walls covered by stacks of the dead others. But as I moved, I saw why the ground ahead of me was a dark crimson, the darkest shade present in this maroon grotto. It was not solid flesh at all, but liquid, the dark blood of whatever this place was. I stood on the shore of a bloody lake, and I looked across, and I saw the distant coast. I saw the pink tongue flesh on the other side of this body, and I saw the door. Traverse the lake of blood, and I could move on. But there was nothing to carry me across. There was no boat, no raft, no ladder, no bridge. I eyed the nearest pile of bodies and slipped on a pair of gloves I had, one by one, dragged them to the shore. Pieces of flesh came off of my hands, and I flung them away, swallowing back my disgust, the bile rising in my throat. Must not vomit. My rations were too valuable to waste. I dragged corpse after corpse over, not studying the difference in their physiology, keeping my eyes from focusing. I pulled a dozen corpses over, my lungs straining, breathing in this biologic air, and I pulled the rope from the bag and strung them together. I had made a wager in my mind of this process, and I hoped it would pay dividends. Otherwise, it was for nothing. My knots were tight, and the bodies were bound, and then I was only to see the soundness of my wager, and I pushed the bodies out into the crimson liquid. They floated, and I breathed again, and I scrambled aboard, my boots splashing through the shallows. I floated on a raft of the dead. I pulled out my small unfolded camp shovel, and I paddled with it, sliding it through the lake of blood. It was slow progress, but it was progress as I paddled. I kept my eyes forward, no different from a canoe journey I would make as a child, paddling with my father in the pond near my childhood home. No different, I told myself. I did not look at the piles of corpses or the viscera that floated in the liquid beneath me. I kept my eyes forward, drawing ever closer to the exit free of this accursed place, this hell of meat. But then a great noise from above me sounded, the sound of a massive sluice of pipework of plumbing. But there was no metal here, only a terrible throat, and I looked above to the sound and saw another orifice open, and thousands of corpses fell from it in a gout of flesh and blood. I only had a moment. I paddled desperately away, but they spilled onto my raft, knocking me off, pushing me down underneath the surface, and I took a desperate breath and closed my eyes, holding it tight to my shovel. My tenuous grip on it was the only thing that saved me. The bodies forced me down, and I swam, my pack heavy but buoyant, and it saved me as well. I swam to the side, hoping to find the edge of this monstrous intake of new meat. And I felt their hands and arms and legs and feet and faces, their torso, their skin, their organs submerged in this lake of blood, and I fought through it all. You were what saved me. Because I imagined you somewhere deep inside this hell, and I would rescue you. I would rescue you. I would save you. And this abattoir would not be the end of me. I swam, I desperately swam, my lungs aching, my breath at an end, but then the swarm of bodies from above was not on me anymore, and I paddled to the surface of the horrible lake, and I reached it, and I pulled in a desperate breath, my lungs screaming in pain. But I could not stop the torrent of bodies and blood from above continuing, expanding, and I realized the base of this great lake was bodies, a mountain of bodies below a lake of blood, and I swam hard, stroke after stroke, the far pink distant shore. I did not stop to let my disgust register. I only thought of your heart. My own pounded as I swam, pushing myself to my limit, but I needed out. I needed escape, and I needed exit. And then I was there on the tongue shore, and I stepped out, my body and clothes soaked with gore and blood. I thought to look back, to consider this hell and what it was, but I pushed toward the membranous flesh door and pulled at its opening, and it cascaded open, and I went through.